Welcome to Madlit Musings, the podcast where you get to eavesdrop on your favorite authors without getting caught. I've been stoked to have authors like Angela Hunt, Bill Myers, Nicole Deese, Tessa Afshar, comedian Bob Smiley, and more on the show, and this year I have another great lineup of storytellers and truth-sayers. If you love to eavesdrop at coffee shops like I do, this is the podcast for you. It's where we get real, we get tough, we laugh, and we might even cry. It's where we meet authors on a different level, where every story and podcast episode has its own heartbeat. So hang out with me today. I'm Jaime Wright, your host at Madlit Musings. This is your podcast for real chats with real authors about real life. Hi everyone, it is Jaime Wright here at Madlit Musings podcast, and I'm super excited because I have a new to our podcast author, but not new to your bookshelf. This is Cathy Gohlke has joined us. Hi, Cathy.
Hi, Jaime. Thank you so much for having me.
It's so exciting to have you because this is your 12th book now that you've put out, I believe.
That's it.
And
yes, that's
I've
right.
seen you on bookshelves all over the place, so it's a joy to have you here.
Thank you. It's a joy to be here.
Good. So, first of all, for readers who don't know you, introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about, who Cathy is, what your favorite hobby is, all that fun stuff.
Well, I live in Virginia, in the mountains of Virginia, and I think my favorite hobby is my grandchildren. That would be my grandchildren
That's a
and
good
family.
Hobby.
Yeah. Close behind is gardening. I love gardening and reading and writing. And I grew up in the South. I grew up mostly in North Carolina, but I've lived in a number of places, Pennsylvania, Maryland, and now Virginia. And we just sort of follow our grandchildren around. Where they move, we move. So we're not far from them, and that's a joy for me.
Yeah, that's great. Grandparents are, I think, the unsung heroes of rearing children. I've had my parents and my husband's parents nearby our entire children's lives, and they have made such an impact in the raising of them and just the time that they spend. So don't ever underestimate your worth as a grandmother. I think that's wonderful.
I had the most wonderful grandmother in the world, and she spent lots of time with me and had a huge impact on my life. So she taught me how to be a grandma even before I was a mom.
Oh, I love that. That's so awesome. Yeah, grandmothers are the best. I love them. I had great grandmothers too. So
good.
Yeah, it's fun. I remember my grandmother laughing at me because we would be gardening because she was a big gardener. And she was always it was always a vegetable garden. I don't know if you do vegetable gardens.
Yep, I do.
Yep, okay. Yep. But she would plant rows upon rows upon rows of green beans. And then my job was to go pick the green beans.
That's a long, tedious job.
Oh, it was miserable and in the heat of summer and it was hot. And I remember getting mad at her one day. We were out picking beans. And of course, she's straddling the beans and she's just picking them like, and I'm just picking one at a time and growling. And she looked at me and she says, just you wait. Someday you will have your own garden and you will be picking beans and you will curse my name. And I'm like, I will never, ever have a garden, let alone grow beans. So guess what I was doing last summer?
Oh,
I was picking green beans and I was going, Grandma, you better stop laughing from heaven because I know exactly what you're thinking right now.
I remember those green bean rows, and so I'm not planting green beans, but I do plant snow peas up a teepee. So that's as close as I get. Yeah.
Oh, is that a teepee? Okay, see, I have not had good luck with snow peas because they always grow weird. But a teepee,
you have
that
to
makes
trellis
sense.
them somehow. Like up something, yeah. And I say a teepee, but it's actually a trellis that I use, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. That's okay. Maybe I should do some research before I just plant things.
I don't always.
Well, anyway,
sometimes I just experiment.
No, I know. It's sometimes I just throw seeds at the ground and say, "Here, grow, little creatures, grow."
See how that works. There you go.
Right, and then my grandma's up in heaven going, "Jaime, I taught you better than that."
I can tell you have her conscience on your shoulder.
I do. Every time I pick a weed, I have a she would weed the yard. She was so like
Wow.
so into weeding. She would take a little trowel. This has
Yeah.
nothing to do with your book, by the way. But she would take a little trowel out into the yard and she'd dig up dandelions and things because they would just annoy her to no end. And I'm like, no,
Wow.
no, I'm
I
not
am
doing
not
that.
that good. I'm not that good, but it really does have a lot to do with my book because there's a lot of gardening in this book.
Okay. All right. Well, let's go there. This is a great segue then. I'm wonderful. This is wonderful. The book is called This Promised Land, and it releases today when we're recording. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
And why don't you take us through the book? Tell us a little bit about it, and I'd love to see how gardening works into it.
Okay. This Promised Land is, it's really sort of a modern, not totally modern because it takes place mostly in 1992, but a retelling of the Prodigal Son story. And it begins with Jenny Pickering Bowden, who is 65, ready to retire and begin her life across the sea in England, working in her family's ancestral gardens. And she's very excited about this. She's had a hard life, a lonely life, and she's ready to go when she gets an unexpected letter from a lawyer in New Scrivelsby, Virginia, the town she left over 50 years ago. Okay. And she left as a prodigal. She ran away as a young Moor bride, and her brother made it clear to her that she was not welcome home again, that she was disinherited, and she was totally alone. So she lived her life that way and never heard anything from the family until she goes back to New Scrivelsby to help this lawyer settle something about the deed on the property, which she believes went to her brother, who has now died, her older brother.
Okay.
Well, it turns out that her older brother had lied to her, and that in fact the farm was left to the two of them, and if either one should die, it should go to the other one in its entirety and not to their descendants unless they were both gone. So now she owns this farm entirely. It's a Christmas tree farm in the Virginia mountains, in a mountain of debt, really run down, and she can think of nothing to do except to sell. But then she learns that there are two nephews. Her brother had two sons she never knew about, and they both believed that the farm should go to them, or would go to them, because their father told them that it would. Well, the one nephew that has worked the farm all his life is really angry and upset about this. The other nephew is a troubled Vietnam vet who has been away and a prodigal himself for many years, and has 3 children. Well, her name's Jenny, and Jenny, still sees that there's nothing she can do. She can't afford to refurbish this farm, and there's a problem with back debt, so many things. So she plans to sell until the morning she decides she's going to sell. 3 young children are left on her porch, her front porch, and they are Mark's children, the children of the younger son. He does eventually come back, but she sees so much of their desperate need in the past history of her life and her situation with her husband, who had been a World War II vet, very damaged from the war.
Okay.
So Jenny doesn't know what to do, and the question is, what will she do? Can she help this family? Will she sell the farm? How could all these 3 generations of warring Pickerings, Pickering's their last name, come together to restore the farm, or to even possibly work together? And if she should do that, how will they respond? Would they work as a family? So there are a lot of questions there, and the story is really the idea that all 3 of the main characters are prodigals, They're the prodigal son in the story at one time in their life or now. And they're all three the older judgmental son. And that's true of all of us. And that is really the idea of the story, that we are all prodigals at one time or another. We've all gone our own willful way. We are all in the position at one time or another of our lives as the older, judgmental, self-righteous son. But can we emulate the running father, the one who welcomes and forgives and restores? And so that's the question. If one of the characters should rise to emulate the running father, how will the others respond, and what can they do about it? There's also a thread of romance in it, and a couple threads of romance. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that sounds like such a great story. And I think the concept of the prodigal son is one that obviously started with the parable that Christ gave in Scripture.
Yes.
And you can see kind of used throughout history as something people really relate to. What made you want to write a story that revolved around that concept and that teaching that Christ first gave us?
I'm so glad you asked that question.
I figured you might be.
I'll tell you, I'll show you the book. It's by Timothy Keller, the late Timothy Keller. It's called The Prodigal God. It is a wonderful book. And in this book, he makes it clear that we're all prodigals. We're all self-righteous. And do we want to stay there? And then there were other things as I began researching the three parables in Luke 15 about this: the lost sheep, the lost coin, the lost son.
Yeah.
And the culture in which it was told. Christy McClellan has a wonderful video series. That's what I'm trying to use. That's called The Running Father. And she brings out in that in our Western society, we look at that, and in fact all of the Bible, to tell us, what does God want from us? How can we relate to God? And what is our position with that? But in the Middle Eastern view, the view is about God toward us. It's more the running. And in fact, here we call it the prodigal son parable. There they call it the running father parable. And it's about how the father restores, which makes sense in the parables of Jesus, because he was responding with those parables to the criticism of why are the Pharisees, why are you eating with these sinners, Jesus?
Right.
And Jesus was showing them, that the Father goes after the lost, and then the question opens at the end about the self-righteous son, and the Pharisees are left with that question. And we don't know how they responded. Did they come into the feast? Did they understand what Jesus was saying? So those are the things I wanted to portray in the story through story. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Well, and story is so powerful too. When you take those concepts and you're able to see them work through characters, you start to understand even more of the dynamics of the prodigal son. I remember when I was little, I was always really mad at the older brother in the story, because here's the father running to greet the son, and the older brother's like, why is he back? I've done all this stuff. And I was like, oh, he's really mean. And then as I got older, I realized I started relating to the older brother more, because I'm like, yeah, how come he gets the short end of the stick when this prodigal son comes back who's done absolute nothing? And it's an interesting lesson. So I guess my question to you in all of that is, how do you think this? Okay, let me see if I can word this question right. You have somebody who's the older brother, who's devoted himself to the family, to doing right, to doing what will make his father proud. And then you have the prodigal son, who's pretty much just wasted his life, and he's coming back in complete patheticness and wanting his father's forgiveness. How do you think God interacts with both brothers differently? Like, what is his, how does he receive both of them? because I think we can relate a little bit to each one. And so as we look at the running father coming toward the one, what about the other one?
That's a good question. And I think it is in the parable that Jesus makes that so clear, because we see very clearly what, as you said, what he does for the prodigal returning, but what he does for the older brother. He and this was made clear to me as I came to understand the culture in which the story was told to begin with. A father would not go out, a patriarchal Jewish father would not go out and entreat his son to come into the feast as he did the older brother. The father really
Okay.
humbled himself to do that for the
Okay.
second time that day. And the other issue is the older brother didn't realize how lost he was already. In the Jewish culture, when that younger son had asked for his portion of the inheritance, he got 1/3. The older son would get a double portion, so he would have 2/3.
Right.
That's what the father said.
Mm-hmm.
Everything I have is yours. That his younger brother already had his inheritance, but
Mm-hmm.
everything I have is yours. But it's right that we rejoice because your brother was lost, he was dead, he's alive, he's found. And so he tries to help the older one understand that everything he has is his, but it's right to rejoice. So I think it's a hard thing for the older self-righteous person, just as it was for the Pharisees to see, why are you eating with these people? Why are you treating them well? And the answer is because God loves all of us. In the end, he sent Jesus to die for all of us, not just the self-righteous, not just the followers of the law, not just the ones that come easily to him. So I think it's a hard thing to understand. One other thing I didn't understand until I started studying the background of the parable is that the older brother, by his silence as the younger brother asked for his inheritance, was also sinning against the father and grieving the father's heart, because it was the place of the older brother to be an intermediary between anyone and the father. He should have stood up and called the younger brother to account at that point, but by his silence he didn't. So he was in essence receiving his double portion, and in fact anything more that the family could prosper. So he got even more in the end. And yet the father didn't even reprimand him about that. He just entreated him to come in. So I think that's how the father relates. The problem is our response or lack of response.
Right, exactly. Well, and I think you probably show that too in your book then, because you've got all these different dynamics of different characters who are going to have different responses. And did you model different characters in your book kind of after these specific people in the story, or did you just say, I'm going to take the general idea of the prodigal son and create a story world that kind of suits where my brain is taking me?
Well, I did want to show that each of the main characters especially were both sons.
Okay.
And that they both had the journey, the arc to emulate the running father. Whether they would or not, whether they both do or not, I don't really want to tell you because that's a spoiler for the book.
Don't spoil.
Right. But yeah, that was the intention, is to show who we all, and these characters really are both, and that there is an opportunity to become much more than that. So that was intentional. But the story, I don't know, this story was just so organic for me, Jamie. Maybe it's because the older character was closer to the time in my life. I'm older than the older character.
Sure.
But that, and her relationship with these great nieces and great nephew, the little children, similar in relationship to my grandchildren, although the children are certainly different and the family dynamics are not at all the same. But it was just a natural, organic story somehow.
Yeah.
It's just it really wove together.
Yeah. I think that's good to have those types of family dynamic stories too, because really, if we're honest, we all relate to it on one level or another. Every family has their different dysfunctions and their different relationships. And then the question is, how do we overcome that?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I don't know any family that's without some level of dysfunction and need to work together and become more than we are at any given time.
Right. Yeah. So the book takes place in, you said 1992, correct?
Yes.
So based on when this book was written, I was still in high school.
Oh, wow.
But it was probably kind of fun to go back. Well, tell that to my kids. I was just told yesterday by my son that I was very, very old.
Oh, man. He has no idea what old is.
Yeah. You realize that we were born in the 1900s now. So I'm part of that generation.
Yeah, me too, but much farther back.
But further back, yeah. But I love the fact that with this story, you've got really kind of a fun smattering of things that people my age, your age, etc., in the generations that grew up in the 80s and 90s or before, whatever. You've got some of that. Like you've got the Vietnam vet, which I relate to because my dad's a Vietnam vet, and you've got the 90s, which a lot of people will relate to, just like I will. It's kind of a neat era that you chose. And so I guess my question is, why did you choose that specific era to place this whole story? Because you could have put that in 1800, you could have put that in contemporary. Why 1992?
Well, such good questions. The reason for that is that I wanted the beginning, which is a prologue, really a chapter of its own, but it's a prologue, to be just before World War II. And because that was important in the story. And I wanted Ginny to be ready to retire, and her natural age then for retirement would be 65 in 1992. And when she would collect Social Security so she could go to England and plant her gardens. Instead she ended up doing a lot of gardens in Virginia. So that was why, because it was just the 50 years later.
Yeah. I love that. So I think the book will appeal really to readers of all ages too, because you've got a main character who's in her 60s, and you've got the nephews. What age group with the? Yeah. Okay. 30s. Yep.
And then the young children, or I forget. Arlo, the oldest, becomes 10 in the book, and the others, I think, are 5 and 3.
Yeah. Well, I have other questions, but if I ask them, they're going to be asking for spoilers, so I guess I can't ask those questions. But is there anything else that you would like the readers to know about this book, or anything else that's on your heart that you'd like an opportunity to share in relation to the story?
One thing that might just be interesting, partly because it's spring, is that they grow a lot of flowers, and they learn how to press flowers and create artwork from flowers. So for anybody who's interested in crafting or gardening, there's a lot of detail about that in there that might be fun. But I think the main thing I hope readers take away is the realization that we are all prodigals at one time or another. We're all self-righteous at one time or another. But we all have the opportunity to forgive and to grow and to look to our Heavenly Father to emulate Him and to be loving and compassionate and merciful. And He will teach us how to do that by His own character and all He's done for us. And especially now, as we're coming up to Easter, and we're supposed to remember the anniversary of our Lord's death and then celebrate His resurrection. It's it just seems a perfect time to remember that all that our Father's done for us, all that He's humbled Himself to do for us, and that just creates so much joy and thanksgiving in our hearts.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, that's wonderful, Cathy. The book is called This Promised Land. It's by Cathy Gohlke, published by Tyndale Publishing, and it's available wherever books are sold. So if you've got your favorite book place you like to purchase books, you snag it because you're going to want to. And Cathy, if readers want to follow you or get to know you more, what's the best way for them to do that?
Well, I would say on my website, authorcathygohlke.com or cathygohlke.com, either one will get you there. You can sign up for my free newsletter, and I'll send a free little short story as a thank you. That's a prequel to an earlier book. I'm also on Facebook, Cathy Gohlke Books, and occasionally on Instagram, but I don't really know how to do that very well, so I wouldn't suggest that. There's a reason I write historicals, because I'm much more comfortable in that era, and there's not technology that I have to deal with except the crank telephone, which is great.
I love it. I love it. That sounds great. I think that's plenty of ways to get a hold of you without Instagram, so we'll be okay with that.
Good.
Oh,
Cathy,
Cathy,
it has been for having me.
Yeah, it's been such a blast, and we'll hopefully have to have you back in the future with any more book releases. And in the meantime, everybody rush out and get This Promised Land by Cathy Gohlke. Her last name is spelled Gohlke, and it's available today. So congratulations on your release.
Thank you, Jaime. Congratulations on your April 1st release.
Thank you so much. And that's a wrap for today here at Madlit Musings. I hope you join us again. And if you want to, be sure you like and subscribe here at your favorite podcast player or on YouTube, because you won't want to miss all the wonderful alerts that let you know when we have another conversation for you to eavesdrop on.